BostonHerald.com. Boston Herald Radio.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of today's version of the Best Money Show on radio. As promised, actually all day and all week, our guest today is Rich Roser, who is an attorney and buyer's broker with Buyers Brokers Only LLC. In the interest of full disclosure, I should mention Buyers Brokers Only LLC is an advertiser here on Boston Herald Radio. And if you've listened to the Money Show at all, you're well aware of that. And we're very, very happy to have them as such. Rich, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, Rick?
Not too bad at all. I want to go over some of the stuff we went over last time, but we've got some additional questions that we're going to go through as well. We'll get into the specifics about Buyers Brokers Only in a bit, but quickly give an overview of your career and how you came to be with Buyers Brokers Only LLC, or how you basically decided you're one of the founders, correct?
Yes, I founded Buyers Brokers Only with my business partner, Dave Kress. It's been almost 10 years now, 2005. And my background is I graduated from Northeastern University.
Actually, I do mean to interrupt you. The fact that you've been successful since 2005 says a lot about your business in and of itself, because you have, been building the business during one of the toughest real estate markets we've had, in half a century.
Yes, it was. There were some tough times around 2008, 2009,
right.
2010. Yeah.
So congratulations to you on that. I apologize for interrupting, but go ahead.
Oh, sure. So, like I was saying, my background is I graduated from Northeastern University School of Journalism in 1991. I graduated from New England School of Law in 1995. I've been an attorney almost 20 years now. I practice law. I've been practicing law for 20 years, but primarily was a trial attorney in the first 10 years or so after law school, and then started Buyers Brokers Only in 2005. Like I said, the way it sort of started was my business partner Dave. He was actually a law clerk for me when he was in law school. And when he graduated, shortly after he graduated, he got his broker's license and his real estate broker's license. And he did some real estate, and then we got to talking, and we decided to start Buyers Brokers Only, and to only represent buyers. And mainly because in the real estate industry, traditionally, real estate companies are seller-centric. They focus on sellers and look out for sellers, and we thought it was time for some people to look out for buyers.
Right, but,
not that we're the first to do this by any means.
Right.
There's exclusive buyer agencies been around long before Buyers Brokers Only, but that's sort of what got us into the business.
Let me jump on a point because I used to be skeptical of buyers brokers, and part of it was because there were different ways that they got paid. I know there were some buyers brokers who would charge people a flat fee plus whatever commission they might make. Explain how buyers brokers get paid now, so to put that issue to rest for potential buyers who are still skeptical of it.
Sure. Different buyer agents have, get compensated different ways. Some still do require sort of a retainer before they will represent someone. Others require a certain percentage. So if the what's called the cooperating commission is lower than that percentage,
mm-hmm.
the buyer would have to make that up. But for the most part, and the way we do it is that a buyer agent gets paid from the listing agent.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, a seller hires a listing agent. In Massachusetts, they're typically paying their listing agent 4 or 5% to sell their house.
Yeah.
And then that listing agent puts the house on the multiple listing service, and it will say right on there, the public doesn't see this, but brokers could see this. It'll say what they call the cooperating commission is. And so a buyer agent is typically getting 2% or 2.5%
mm-hmm.
of the sale, and they're splitting that commission with the listing agent. And that's how they're getting paid. So our clients aren't paying us any money out of their pocket.
Now, what happens if the listing agent has to split it with another someone in their office? Then basically that's their problem, so to speak. My point being that there's no have you ever found any listing agents who are hesitant to deal with a buyer who has a buyer's broker because they have to pay that fee to the buyer's broker?
Not anymore. I mean, that may have been the case, 20, 25 years ago. Mm-hmm. But it's very common that people have buyer agents now, and so listing agents expect that most of the time they are going to split that commission. And you bring up an important point, which is some people think that if they don't have anybody representing them and they do it themselves, that somehow they're going to get a better deal. But in fact, the only thing that changes, or two things change. One is the listing agent gets to keep the whole 4 or 5% for him or herself. Yeah. And the second thing is the buyer has nobody looking out for them. So there really is no downside to having a buyer agent.
Frankly, I have long told people, as long as you have a good broker, whether it be seller or buyer, I think anybody who is involved in the purchase or sale of a property should have a good broker representing them. And buyers more so than sellers, but sellers as well. Plus, it just makes the entire process better if you have an experienced broker and, frankly, an experienced attorney representing both parties. It avoids a lot of problems, including the fact that emotions often get involved with the buyer and the seller, but usually the buyer's broker and the attorneys become very pragmatic and make deals that should happen. I would assume you agree with that.
I agree with that, absolutely. When everyone's fully represented with brokers and lawyers, things do tend to go smoother. Things get done when they're supposed to get done, and they get done correctly. If you've got, like you said, a good brokers involved and good attorneys involved, and it makes everyone's life easier, and it makes for a lot less stressful transaction for both the buyer and the seller.
Explain the difference between a designated buyer's agent and an exclusive buyer agent, and why the exclusive buyer agent, I assume, in fact, I'm quite clear, is much better than having a designated buyer agent.
Sure. So everyone sort of understands that the listing agent represents the seller. That agent has a fiduciary duty to the seller. Their loyalty is to the seller. And, they're not looking out for the buyer. They're looking out for the seller to get the best price. In Massachusetts, a home buyer has two choices. They could have a designated buyer agent or an exclusive buyer agent. What a designated buyer agent is someone that it represents buyers, home buyers. Typically, they represent both buyers and sellers. But the important thing is that they work at a firm that represents both buyers and sellers. And so what that means is as the title suggests, they are designated to represent a particular buyer. But everyone else in the company that they work for, their loyalty really is to any sellers that they may have, that they're listing property for. So where problems can arise is you're working with a designated buyer agent. That person both represents buyers and sellers, and you as a home buyer likes a property that buyer agent also is listing. If you want to go forward with making an offer on that property, that designated buyer agent is now becoming what's called a dual agent. Mm-hmm. They're representing both the seller and the buyer. And obviously it's pretty clear what the problem with that is. I mean, you're really not getting 100% loyalty from your buyer agent if they're also representing the other issue that comes up is that that you may like a house that someone in that buyer agent's office is listing. So now you've got the potential conflict of your buyer agent is working closely with agent who is representing that seller. And frankly, that office is representing the seller because your agent's just been designated to represent.
So even though it's legal for them to do it, and they may claim that there's no conflict of interest. There's sort of a underlying feeling of a conflict of interest. Whereas if you have a exclusive buyer's agent, then there's no question that the buyer's agent's fiduciary duty is to you, the buyer, and there's no conflict of interest at all.
Absolutely. And the other thing that comes up when you're working with a designated buyer agent whose office may be listing the property is some of these offices provide incentives to their agents who bring in buyers that then buy property that's being listed by that office. So there's that conflict as well. When you're working with an exclusive buyer agent, that means that not only are they a buyer agent, but everyone in the office, everyone in the company is a buyer agent, that they never represent sellers. So you never have a situation of dual agency. You never have a situation where they're trying to get you to buy a property that they're listing or that someone in their office is listing, because no one lists property at all. There's 100% loyalty 100% of the time.
We're going to have to take a break in a minute, but very, very quickly, because I think people sometimes are not totally sure on this, explain what a fiduciary duty is.
Well, it's a fiduciary duty is when you owe loyalty or responsibility to a particular party or client that you're representing, and that you're looking out for their best interest. You
have to basically treat them as if how you would treat yourself, or even better, when making decisions or protecting their money or anything like that.
Absolutely.
Actually, I won't give you the number, but I will tell you that we're talking to Rich Rosa, who is a founder and a member of Buyers Brokers Only, LLC. We're going to take a break, and we'll come back and continue our conversation with him right here on the Best Money Show on radio, on Boston Herald Radio. Welcome back. We're talking with Rich Rosa this hour, who is a founder and member of Buyers Brokers Only, LLC, which is a exclusive buyer home buyer agent. Actually, I don't think I asked you this last time, Rich. Do you only represent buyers who are buying residential homes that they're going to live in, or do you ever represent buyers who are looking for either, actually I'll give you two categories. One is strictly investment, and the other is, do you ever represent buyers who are looking for like a 3-family that they're going to live in, but then obviously rent out the other 2 units?
Yeah, we do represent investors who do both of those things. Buy multifamily houses that they're going to be an owner occupant in, and then rent the other unit or 2 units. And also people that are strictly investors. We don't do very much commercial property, like big industrial pieces of property, or things like that. But we do represent investors.
But have you ever done? Actually? Let me put it this way: what's the largest property that you have ever, or Buyers Brokers Only has ever represented a buyer on?
Probably a 3-family. I can't think of anything bigger than a 3-family.
So somebody wants to buy a 20-unit building, or wants to buy a mixed-use building, or something that you usually don't get involved there.
That's not something that's our expertise, no.
Okay. You point out in some of your literature that despite the benefits, many buyers don't hire buyers brokers, and I certainly understand that, because of, back in the old days, it was kind of a fuzzy area in some places. But 2 questions. Do you know what percentage of buyers hire buyers brokers now, and why do you think it is that so many buyers, other than the reasons I mentioned, do you know of any other reasons why people don't hire buyers brokers?
I don't know the exact percentage. If I had to guess, it's probably somewhere around 75% of people are represented by a buyer agent at some point in the process. Yeah, I think it's probably about that high.
That's a lot higher than it was 10 years ago, which is good.
Most of that, by the way, though, would be designated buyer agents.
Oh, okay.
There's just not that many exclusive buyer agents out there, because most real estate agents want to be able to get both sides of the commission. So there's very few exclusive buyer agents. So most of that 75% is designated buyer agents.
I have always told people to get a good real estate attorney, and one of the numerous reasons why is that and it's not the main reason, but a good real estate attorney can help you find other professionals as a buyer or as a seller that you would need in the home buying / selling process. I would assume that a good buyer's broker like yourself can do the same. You can refer people to good real estate attorneys and property inspectors and mortgage companies / banks that you've dealt with, correct?
Yeah, that's a big part of our service to our clients is making referrals to banks and mortgage companies, to real estate attorneys, home inspectors, insurance agents.
One of the things that I always tell people when they're selling a home is one of the big things, not the biggest, or maybe one of the biggest things that a seller's broker can do for you is to help you find what the proper price that you should put on the home is, because that's the most important thing when selling a home. But I think people underestimate how important it is for a buyer to know, whether a piece of property is priced properly and whether it's a decent deal or not. Tell me how, or tell our listeners how buyers brokers can help their clients in figuring out whether a property is priced properly or what's a fair offer to make, and how you go about doing so.
Sure. Well, what you're referring to is what's called the CMA, or comparative market analysis, right. And obviously that's a big part of what we do for clients. And everyone does it a little bit differently. There's not one way to help a client determine what that price should be and what they should offer. The way I do it is I like to be very transparent, rather than just tell a client that that their house is worth, that the house they want to buy is worth X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
I like to do a lot of research on the MLS, and then download that data into a spreadsheet for my clients, so that I'm not just telling them that I think it's worth X, but I think it's worth X, and here's all the data. And what I'll do is I like to do a couple different things. Let's say the house is listed for $399. I might look up all the comparable sales between $375 and $425 to give people an idea of what that price range gets you for a house in that particular city or town or that neighborhood. I might also look up houses that have the same amount of rooms and bedrooms and bathrooms and other characteristics, and then put that data in there. I'll also look at the trends in that particular city or town. Are the prices going up? Are they going down? How fast are they going up? Things like that. And then I provide all that data to my clients so that we could come up with a negotiation strategy, which I think is really important to have a strategy, because you talked about how emotions sometimes get in the way.
Yeah.
And when you have a strategy, it takes some of the emotion out of it. You tell a client, the client could figure out, what are we going to offer? When we get a counter offer, what is going to be our next offer? Mm-hmm. And we don't worry too much about what the counter offer is. We just know this is going to be our next offer, and that's just a better way to negotiate rather than to react to whatever the seller is doing. And that is very important. That's a key point, too. You want to get a counter offer. You want to get the best price you possibly can, but you also want to make an offer that gets a counteroffer. Because if you don't get a counteroffer, if you get just a no from the seller, then you're stuck with two bad decisions. One bad decision is to walk away, and that's not a good decision, because you like the house. That's why you're making the offer to begin with. The second bad decision is to then make another offer, because now all you've done is negotiated with yourself. You've made two offers before the seller has come down on price at all. And when that happens, buyers typically end up paying more than they would have if they got that counteroffer. Because once you engage the seller in a negotiation, usually, you do better than you would have if you didn't get that first counteroffer.
Two questions along those lines. First off, people ask the question, well, how much below the asking price can I offer without insulting, so to speak, the seller? First off, that depends on whether the seller has priced it properly, correct?
Absolutely, and that's the whole point of doing that comparative market analysis, because, sometimes houses are priced very well, sometimes they're priced very high. And so you want to do that to get a good idea of what the market value is. And it's really important in this market because we're in a market right now that's very it's very hot. I mean, there's not a lot of inventory.
Yeah.
A lot of houses are getting multiple offers on them. And it's easy to get caught up in that emotion. You know, you hear about all these multiple offers, and you automatically assume, well, I gotta offer list price, or I gotta go over list price. But sometimes it's just not priced right. And if someone else is willing to overpay for it, you know, that's their problem.
Right. But
you need to know what a house is worth, so you're not just getting caught up in the emotion of it.
That's like 60-70% of the ball game, in my opinion. Two things along those lines. People ask, well, can I ever, make what would be an insulting offer? And my response is, as long as you're willing to, to have the seller say no, then, I mean, if you want to try, fine. Just recognize that if you make what is called an insulting offer, then there's a good chance you're not going to get it. But assuming somebody doesn't want to go that route, and assuming the house is priced properly after you've done your market analysis or you've done comps, which sort of the shorthand in the business, where do you have like a percentage below the asking price that you usually tell a buyer to offer, or does it really depend much, much more on what the market is like in this market where we have a relatively high demand but an extremely low supply?
I think there's a number of factors. I think what you just touched on, the low inventory is certainly a factor. I think that another important factor is knowing whether or not there's other offers. I mean, typically I will ask a listing agent, do you have any other offers on the property? Certainly if they have no other offers and you don't anticipate there's going to be another offer before you make your offer, mm-hmm. that's very different than knowing that, okay, I'm going to make an offer now, but there's already three. Because what I tell clients and what typically happens is if there's multiple offers, you're going to get one shot at it.
Yeah.
There's not going to be a negotiation. There's not going to be a counteroffer. In most situations, sellers are going to look at all the offers and pick the one with the best price and the best terms. So that would also be a factor. Now, let's say, for instance, like you said, I think it's priced fairly good, and there's no other offers. What would I tell my client to offer? Once we determine what we want to pay for it, I typically tell clients you don't need to go more than about $8,000 to $12,000 under where you want to finish. There's this idea that if you go really low, that somehow you're going to meet in the middle, but that's typically not how it plays out. So I usually say, look, if you want to get it at X price, start about $8,000 or $12,000 under that price, and we should be able to hopefully get to that price point. Now, back to your point about insulting offers. If a house is overpriced, and we do have to make an offer that's significantly below the list price, mm-hmm. What I usually try to do is when I email to the listing agent, I always like to email for two reasons. One, everything I'm saying is in writing, and two, I could copy my client on it, and my client knows exactly what I'm saying on their behalf.
Yeah.
So when I send that email out to the listing agent with the offer and the other documents that go along with an offer, I'll usually explain, look, we know that this is quite a bit under what the house is listed for, but these are our reasons. And maybe I'll include some comps, or maybe I'll just go over some of the things that we saw in the house, like it needs a new roof and the heating system is very old, and things like that. And sometimes, I'm actually doing the listing agent a favor because they've got a seller who's not being realistic, mm-hmm. and the listing agent knows that. And so that's a third reason to send an email, because I found that sometimes the listing agents then just go forward my email to their client, and they're happy to do it because I've just made maybe the same case that they made when they got the listing, which is this is why it's really worth this much and not what the seller wanted to list it for.
And right there you've given just another sparkling reason why people should have a good buyer's agent, because most home buyers are not going to know would not think to do that. We're talking with Rich Rosa, who is the one of the founders and a member of Buyers Brokers Only LLC. We'll take a break. We'll come back with more and continue our conversation with Rich Rosa right here on the Best Money Show on radio on Boston Herald Radio. Welcome back. We're talking with Rich Rosa, who is the founder and one of the members of Buyers Brokers Only LLC. Specifically, Buyers Brokers LLC was established, you said, in 2005. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
And at that point, it was just you and your partner, correct?
Yes, it's just me and Dave Press.
Okay. At this point, how many brokers does Buyers Brokers LLC employ, and what geographic areas do you cover?
There are 24 of us, and we cover most of eastern Massachusetts, greater Boston, Worcester County, South Shore, North Shore, and southern New Hampshire.
Okay, so all of the brokers licensed in New Hampshire, or you just have specific ones that are?
No, there's just three of us that are there's 3 brokers that are licensed in New Hampshire, and the rest are licensed in Massachusetts.
Suppose somebody hires you specifically to represent them, but they're looking up in Andover, let's say, but they end up spreading their search area to include, say, Nashua, New Hampshire. Do you, in those situations, then sort of work in conjunction with whoever your associate in New Hampshire is?
Yes, and in fact, one of those 3 brokers that's licensed in New Hampshire is my business partner, Dave, and so we work together on a lot of our clients. But so, yes, we could do that. And actually, we do that sometimes just within Massachusetts. Sometimes people are just looking for a geographic area that is a certain distance from Boston because they work in Boston. So it's often our brokers will team up together, and maybe somebody works with them on the South Shore and somebody else works with them on the North Shore.
One of the things I like about Buyers Brokers LLC is that you are all attorneys. Now, Buyers Brokers don't have to be attorneys, but you have set a rule within your company that all of your brokers are attorneys. Why did you decide to do that?
Well, Dave and I were both attorneys when we started the company, and as we decided to expand, we liked the idea of just having that sort of level of professionalism and knowledge of the law and real estate going forward. We're not a law firm. We don't give legal advice, but what we tell clients is that we have a certain, knowledge base about real estate. I mean, everyone who passes the bar has to take property law and pass the property law section of the bar exam. Mm-hmm. And so I tell clients that, although I'm not going to give you advice, I don't forget all that I know when we go inside a house. And so if I see something that I think is legal in nature that is a red flag, then I'll just tell the clients, you need to talk to your attorney about this.
On the other hand, excellent segue. On the other hand, I'm sure if you get a buyer who doesn't have an attorney, you urge them to have a separate real estate attorney representing them, correct?
Absolutely. Big mistake buying a house without an attorney. In fact, we think it's so important that our business model is that we give a small rebate after closing to all our clients to offset the cost of their legal fees. We think that everyone should really have an attorney. It's very important.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's outright stupid for somebody to buy a home without having an attorney. In fact, I'm an attorney, but when I buy a property, I always hire a friend of mine who I've worked with before, who's an excellent real estate attorney for a number of reasons, not the least of which I'm sure you share. The old saying that an attorney who has himself as a client is a pretty stupid person. What should home buyers know about some specific questions? What should home buyers know about getting a mortgage? Including, and I'd like you to stress this, the fact that it's very important to be pre-approved for a mortgage before you make an offer on a home.
Well, that's correct. I mean, in fact, it's customary in Massachusetts that when you make an offer, you provide a written offer along with a pre-approval letter and a copy of a deposit check. And so in Massachusetts, no one's going to consider your offer without a pre-approval letter.
which is smart, frankly. But a pre-approval letter doesn't mean you'll definitively get the loan. You still property still has to be appraised, and there are other things, there has to be a title search and what have you. But it basically says that as long as there's no problems on those ends, the bank has said they will lend you up to X amount of dollars to buy a piece of property.
Yes, I mean it's still somewhat of a preliminary look into a borrower's finances, but yes, it all depends on the lender. Some do a much thorough check into the potential borrower before they will issue a pre-approval letter, and others do a little bit less of an investigation. But ultimately, yes, that's what the letter is saying, that this person, we've checked their credit, we checked how much money they make, we know how much debt they have, and we've determined that they could afford to purchase, a house that costs this much.
I know that you think that having an out-of-state lender, be it a bank or a mortgage company, can be a bad idea. I agree with you. Why do you think it's a bad idea?
Well, it's a bad idea for a couple of reasons. When you're making an offer, especially in a situation where there's multiple offers, a lot of listing agents are advising their sellers, when they're considering offers, on a lot of things. And one of those things may be that two offers are very close, and one offer has a pre-approval from a well-known bank in the state of Massachusetts, and that listing agent may be familiar with that bank and knows that they do a thorough job of investigating a person's finances before issuing a pre-approval letter. And then on the other hand, you've got this person that went on the internet and found a company in California who did the pre-approval online, and what a seller doesn't want is to go through the process, be 3 or 4 weeks into it, and to find out that the buyer cannot actually afford the house and have it fall apart. So one reason to use an in-state lender is that it could make your offer stronger. The other problem that comes up, and you know this as an attorney, Massachusetts is just one of 13 states in the country that requires that an attorney do the title examination, that's the certified title. And so what problem that I've run into in the past is that you work with a lender who's out of state, and they work in a state which is referred to as a title state. They have title companies that do the closings. Yeah. And this could be quite confusing for these lenders when they don't realize that they have to get an attorney in our state to do this. And a lot of times they find out too late, and it really delays things, and it could be a problem. Or worse yet, if your buyer agent isn't recommending an attorney for you right away when they know you're using someone from out of state, that lender out of state might just pick any old attorney, and who knows whether he or she is any good.
Right, and especially in this market where it's such a low supply, you oftentimes are competing with other buyers. If a seller had to choose between you and another buyer, and basically everything is even, the offer and the conditions and everything, but you've got a good local lender, and the other person's got a lender in California that may tip it in your direction.
Absolutely. I don't think there's any question about that.
We're talking with Rich Rosa, who is the founder and one of the members of Buyers Brokers Only, LLC. We have to take a break. We'll come back with more of our conversation with Rich Rosa right here on the Best Money Show on radio on Boston Herald Radio. Welcome back. Before we get back to our conversation with Rich Rosa from Buyers Brokers Only, LLC, let me remind you, as always, the wise consumer is the informed consumer. So before buying, selling, renting, refinancing, or signing any real estate-related agreement, or before making any major money decision whatsoever, it's always best to speak with and take the advice of a qualified attorney, accountant, and or if you find a good one or a great one, such as my co-host, Susan Kaplan, a financial planner. Let me also thank my producer, engineer, text master, and all-around guru here at the station and the Money Show, Christian Burgoyne, doing a great job as always. And thank Rich Rosa for being with us. I should also mention that if you are not a follower of Susan's and mine on Twitter, you should be for a whole bunch of reasons. We tweet out all kinds of articles that are we just can't get to here on the show, like the things I read today, for example, you can find on my Twitter account. There's not a lot of crossover between what Susan and I tweet out. Like 99% of it's different. And also, when I get home each night, I tweet out the link for today's show as well as our Twitter library. So, for example, if you wanted to re-listen to this interview, you could do so by going to finding that link. But you have to do that through our Twitter by being a follower of us on Twitter. My Twitter address is @RSchaefer, SHAFFAR1. That's @RSchaefer1, and Susan's is @SKaplan, KAPLAN 111. So it's @RSchaefer1 and @SKaplan111. And towards that end, a couple of things. First, Rich, hopefully we'll have a chance to get in again, but just to make sure, how do people contact you, and what's your the phone number for for Buyers Brokers Only LLC, and also your web address, where they also can listen to this interview as well as the interview we did with you before, because we supply you with that. And frankly, they may, although I love people to go to our podcast, they may want to listen to the interview on your web page, because we edit it down for our clients so that you don't have to listen to all the commercials again.
Yes, they could contact Buyers Brokers Only at 978-835-5906.
Okay, give us that number again.
978.
Yep.
835-5906.
Okay.
They could go to our website. It's buyersbrokersonly.com. There they could see all of our brokers. They could contact via email. There's also various guides that they could download, guides about buying a house, getting a mortgage, things like that. And they could also read our blog, where we post quite a bit of information about home buying. And
I assume there's a place there that they can click on to listen to the interviews you've done here on Boston Herald Radio.
There is, yes.
Also, we're running out of time, but I definitely want you to, as you did last time, in 200 words or as many words as you want, explain why quickly, and I think we've done that in the last couple of hours, why people should definitely get a buyer's broker, but why. And frankly, I've been very, very impressed with all of this, the way you run your company.
Thank you.
Why people should, when they hire a buyer's broker, they should hire Buyers Brokers Only LLC.
Well, I think it's very important that people do their homework, and that they should interview more than one buyer agent and get a feel for who they want to work with and who's going to be a good fit for them. I hope that one of those people they interview is an exclusive buyer agent at Buyers Brokers Only. Our motto here is, you do what's best for the client, what's in the client's best interest, even if it means, more work and less money. And that sort of motto has served us well. Like you said, we've grown quite a bit over the last 10 years. And quite frankly, it's really been over like the last, 6 years or so. That's when we really started adding other buyer brokers to our company. And so, we really take a lot of pride in the fact that we have excellent reviews on websites like Angie's List and Yelp. And, I hope that people will, give us a call and take the time to sit down and talk with one of our brokers about what they hope to accomplish with home buying. I
have to say, two things that I'm very impressed with, which actually a lot of things, but two things I'm especially impressed with is the fact that you grew, and I hadn't even thought of this last time we talked to you, you really grew the company during a very difficult real estate period. So that says a lot. And the fact that all of you are attorneys, I think, is a major plus for people. There's just a lot of knowledge that if you know a lot about real estate, but you're also an attorney, you're just going to be, farther ahead of a lot of people who are in the real estate market. One thing I want to ask you specifically, because a lot of people say, well, I'm going to, go to some open houses and such, and then I'll look for buyer's broker. Explain why they probably should get the buyer's brokers first.
Well, yeah, there's a number of reasons. First, the most important reason is when you just show up at open houses and you're talking to the agent that's at that open house, that agent works for the seller. Their obligation is to do what's best for the seller. And what ends up happening is they start to have what they think is an innocent conversation with the agent at the open house, and they reveal information that they probably shouldn't reveal to that agent. Mm-hmm. And then if they ultimately make an offer on that house, that agent is going to use that information against them to benefit the seller. It could be something as simple as, the agent at the open house asks, where do you live? And you say, oh, well, my spouse is relocating. We're relocating from out of state. My spouse just got a new job in Boston. He or she starts in 60 days. Well, now they know that you need a house because you just walked into the open house with two children. Who maybe are going to be starting school in September. Maybe it's July when you're doing this, or June, and they know that you have a time frame that you need to find a house, and so that's a piece of information that I would never reveal to a listing agent if I were working with a buyer. But now that listing agent knows that information and maybe uses it against you when it comes time to negotiate.
Excellent point. Plus, as you mentioned, you as a buyer's broker and as a lawyer walking in with them may see some red flags about the property that they would never think of. So it's good to have you there from the beginning. Real quick, Rich, it's been a pleasure talking to you, but give out your phone number and your web address again.
Sure. Our phone number is 978-835-5906, and the website address is buyersbrokersonly.com.
Okay, give those out again real quick. You have to give out everything twice on the radio.
978-835-5906 is the number to call, and online it's buyersbrokersonly.com.
Rich, always a pleasure to talk to you. Rich Roser, founder and member of Buyers Brokers Only, LLC. I'm very impressed by them, and if you're looking to buy a home, you should definitely talk to them. Look forward to talking to you again. For myself, for Rich Roser, for Susan Kaplan, for Larry Kaplan, and for Christian Burgoyne, you've been listening. We'll see you Monday at 4, by the way. You've been listening to the Best Money Show on radio on Boston Herald Radio.
Boston Herald, BostonHerald.com, Boston Herald Radio.